This is a presentation for the Winnipeg Philatelic Society, Western Canada's oldest stamp club. And it's a question I get asked all the time, which is, how much is my stamp worth? And it's a really complicated question. The answer is not simple. Now, my first answer to the question is, it's a hobby. It's about fun. It's about learning something, guided by stamps. Why did Emperor Napoleon III suddenly disappear from French stamps? And why did the next set of French stamps get printed in Bordeaux? And it all has to do with the Franco-Prussian War, which I didn't know until I started looking at the stamps. Being part of a stamp club is also a lot of fun too. And at the end, if you have curated your collection well and mounted it carefully and accurately in an album and sorted out your duplicate stamps in some kind of way, it might be worth a bit of money. Not necessarily a lot, but it might be worth a bit of money. But my point is, as in any hobby, it's not about the money. If you had a hobby of cross-country skiing, you wouldn't want to know how much you could sell it for at the end. Or if your hobby is going to NHL hockey games, at the end of the season your ticket stubs have no value. So unless you had a lot of fun in accordance with the money you spent, it's not a hobby you should be pursuing. And the same applies to collecting stamps. If you're having fun collecting stamps, if you have a reasonable and appropriate budget, and you're having a good time, that's the important thing. And at the very end, when you want to get rid of your collection, if it's worth a little bit of money, that's wonderful too. Catalog value causes a lot of people a lot of trouble. It is a guide and not a guarantee. So people will say to me, I have a stamp that catalogs at $500. Someone should buy it from me for $500. Well, first of all, you have to be very sure that the stamp you have is correctly described and is the $500 stamp, and it may not be. And second, the catalog value is not a guarantee. It doesn't say that someone will promise to buy you or buy that stamp from you. Catalog value is also for a perfect stamp. If you read in the front of the catalog, it says the prices are for a grade of very fine, which doesn't mean very fine, it means excellent. And catalog also suggests that if you think you have this stamp and it's a very fine stamp, you need a certificate from someone that's recognized as being able to do that A, it's a genuine stamp, and B, it is in fact very fine. So it's really complicated understanding catalog value. Now, the other problem is often there are similar stamps with different catalog numbers and very different catalog values. And they can differ by watermark, which to see watermarks you have to turn the stamp over, put it on a black piece of paper, shine a light on it, perhaps at an angle, use a magnifying glass. I hate it, it's too hard for me. Perforation, you have to get a perforation guide and measure the perforation. The perforations are the little holes punched in the side of the stamp so you can separate them from the sheet, and they differ, and there's various, you need a perforation gauge to help you. Color varieties, particularly older stamps where mixing the color was 3 pounds of this, 4 pounds of that, 5 pounds of this, and the pigments that you bought varied, and if you put in 3 1/4 pounds as opposed to 3 pounds, the stamp came out a slightly different color. So you'll see in older stamps, the post office probably intended to produce a brown stamp, but they ended up being orange brown, dark brown, medium brown, and it's very difficult to determine that the stamp you have, is it orange brown, is it violet brown, is it dark brown, is it light brown, which one is it? And someone that has a couple of hundred copies will be able to show you where on the color spectrum your stamp lies, but it's hard if you only have one stamp. And sometimes the catalog value of dark brown and light brown are substantially different. There can be tiny engraving differences. And there's a picture for every stamp, but sometimes they use the same picture to describe many different stamps. So there'll be an illustration number, A1, in the catalog, and there might be 20 or 30 or 100 stamps that are illustration A1, all with slight differences, and all with perhaps significant differences in catalog value. So particularly in older stamps, you really have to know what you're doing to be able to figure it out. Now, similar stamps with different catalog numbers and different catalog values. The front of the Scott catalog, for instance, lists die differences of Commonwealth stamps. So there are, in the Commonwealth stamps of particularly Queen Victoria and George V, there are two standard different designs, and they have different prices, different catalog values. There are pictures and descriptions at the front of the catalog. I find it hard even then, and I have to flip back and forth and go, oh yeah, this line is higher and that line is lower. Okay, got it again. Often there are watermarks, similar watermarks used, or the same watermark used on many different country stamps, particularly in the British Commonwealth. So sometimes the watermarks are at the front of the catalog, common designs, but even with pictures and descriptions, and even with pictures and descriptions within the country listing, it can be hard to understand and differentiate between the stamps. And I've sometimes puzzled over it and suddenly go, oh, now I get it. It's difficult to do. And the catalog values can be quite different. So if you are looking at a stamp, particularly similar stamps, and particularly older stamps, and I will define older stamps as before 1900 and maybe even before 1880. If you have a stamp like that, it will have been looked at by 3 or 4 other collectors, all of whom, or many of whom, will have known the differences and the differences in value. So if it was in fact a valuable stamp, somebody before you got your stamp would have noted that. So you have to look hard for similar stamps in the catalog before you can be somewhat confident that you have the higher catalog value one as opposed to the lower catalog one. And given that a bunch of other people have looked at it, you probably have the lowest catalog value one. That's my rule. When I look at a stamp and go, oh look, this stamp has a very high catalog value, I always go, okay, keep looking, okay. Design A2, okay. Go forward a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5. Here it is, 20 cents. Same stamp as this one, but it differed in perforation. The other thing is, don't be dazzled by catalog value. Oh, it has a $500 catalog value. So I said before, that's not a guarantee that someone is out there prepared to pay you $500 for the stamp. We'll talk about that more. So here is a stamp that was issued by the United States sometime or other between 1861 and 1867. If you look in the catalog, it is design A25, illustration number A25. Okay, so we find that catalog number 65, 86, 85, 85C, 88, and 94 are all illustration A25. And the Scott catalog value goes from $3 for 65 to $33,750 for 85C, and the other values are in between there. And we see they differ by the grill, and what the U.S. Post Office did to an attempt to defer fraudulent stamps was they put a grill on. And so the grill is a set of lines, 6 lines by 5 lines, and the C, D, Z, E, and F grills are all different numbers of lines, vertically and horizontally. And so the Z grill was uncommon, hence it's highly valuable, high catalog value. Now applying my rule, I probably have 65, and I do. I turned it over, and found that there is in fact no grill on it. Grills actually can mess up your stamp because it's a whole bunch of tiny little lines stamped into the back of the stamp, impressed into the back of the stamp, so it can kind of sometimes mess up your stamp. Anyway, this is number 65, and it has a pretty cancel. Those are nice rings. Now, they do kind of go over Washington's head, but the centering is poor. You can see that it's shifted way over to the right. Not so bad top to bottom, but it's way over to the right where the perforations cut into the design, so that's considered bad. There's a short perf the bottom left there, which until I magnified this stamp way up so I could put it in this presentation, I hadn't noticed. Also, the perforations on the left side there are a bit toned, and probably you can argue the color isn't perhaps as bright as it should be. So it has a catalog value of $3 and a market value. You can see them being sold on the internet for 75 cents. And perhaps this stamp wouldn't even sell for 75 cents. Oh, there's some short perfs at the top too, and the centering. Maybe if I wanted to sell it, I couldn't even get 75 cents. However, I'm quite happy having this in my collection, and I certainly don't want a $3,000 stamp in my collection because I'd have to have it in a safety deposit box, and I wouldn't be able to look at it. So, 6 different stamps, big variety in catalog value, and also a big difference between catalog value and market value. And so, for instance, 85 with a catalog value of $1,200 sold for $525, so that's a third of catalog. The Z Grill, quite a high catalog value, sold for 10% of catalog, and that probably has to do with all the things I've just talked about: centering, perfs, color. A more perfect example would have sold for closer to catalog value. So if you had decided that you wanted catalog number 85C, you might just have been able to get it for $350 or even less. Still too much to pay for a stamp, but never mind. Here is Sweden. The illustration number is A5. In the catalog, it's called numeral of value. There are 4 different stamps that are this design. Now, the stamp has a nice cancel, but it's badly centered top to bottom. And there's a perf off at the top. So, wouldn't it be nice if it were catalog value number, or catalog number 18 with a catalog value of $135? I'm going to apply my rule and decide it's probably 29. Perf 13, and when I check the perfs, yes, it's perf 13. So it has a catalog value of $3.50. Could be 29A, an imperforate pear mint. Well, it's not that. That has a lovely catalog value. We also suspect it might be value number 42, which has a lower catalog value. That's easy to check. You turn the stamp over and there's a post horn printed on the back, or there's not. So when I turned this over, I expected to see a post horn, but I didn't. So I went, oh great, it's got a catalog value of $3.50. I then looked up the market value for 29 and 42, and you can get them both for 20 cents. So $3.50 catalog value. And I would guess, perhaps, I don't know, but I would guess that the perfs were all badly aligned on this stamp. And so all of the stamps pretty much look like this one. And if you happen to find one that's actually properly centered, it's not the way they were printed, it's not the way it was done. But if by chance you happen to find one where the perfs are perfect and the centering is perfect, then maybe you'd pay $3.50 for it. I don't care. That stamp looks just fine in my collection. I'm okay. Now, another example of how complicated it can be to figure out the correct catalog number. Australia, which was founded from a bunch of different Australian states in 1913, between 1913 and 1936, they had design A1, illustration number A1, and it was a kangaroo on the map of Australia. They also had a stamp called the George heads, King George V, head of King George V. And there are many, many different varieties, watermarks, perforations. It's just endless. So I haven't put up a picture because I don't even think that I could correctly describe the 2p gray roux, catalog number 338 or 48. I'm not sure that I could differentiate between them. And I don't care because I just want the cheapest one. I want a face different example. So I've got what I think is probably catalog number 48, but I'm not sure, but I don't care. It might be catalog number 3, which has a similar market value. So we've got 3 different catalog values. We have market values that are, again, 10%, something like that, of catalog, proving that you don't get catalog value almost ever. So I haven't provided a picture because I don't trust myself to distinguish. This is a very specialized area. If you want to distinguish between the roux or the George heads, you need a specialized catalog and specialized knowledge, and you have to have an interest in knowing about this stuff. And I don't. I just want a face different example. So paying 75 cents for number 48 is fine for me. Now, market is what it's sold for, not it's what it's listed for on eBay, not what it's in the catalog for. I see on internet sites some spectacular listings of common stamps. Older stamp from 1950, $400. And it's a stamp with a 20-cent catalog value. No idea what's going on. And they tend not to sell. So don't get taken in when people have spectacular listing prices. They don't sell. And market, of course, varies depending on the condition and the centering and all kinds of factors. It varies. Now, some principles based on what we've just done. The first thing you have to do is find the illustration number. So you have to look at the stamp you have, and sometimes the illustrations are very similar. So distinguishing between illustration A4 and A5 is sometimes complicated. So if you have a stamp that you want to find out what it is, and this is fun, and you're having a good time looking through the catalog and finding out which one the stamp is, that's okay. If you're doing it to make money, the amount of time you spend to find out that you have a stamp with a catalog value of 40 cents isn't worth your time. So you find the illustration number, and then you look and see how many catalog numbers have the same or similar illustration number, because sometimes there are 2, as I said, very similar illustration numbers. And this may be over 2 or 3 pages in the catalog, so you have to look broadly. You can't just look immediately above or immediately below. And it goes over many years. As with the roux, they were issued over, I think, 10 years. So you have to go through many pages of the catalog to start to get close to being comfortable that you've got the right catalog number and the right catalog value. Now, what differentiates between catalog number 2 and catalog number 3, both of which look the same? Now, the catalog will describe this, and you have to be careful, because if they have 2 sort of sets of stamp, one above the other, and they're the same perforation and watermark, they won't repeat that. But if the perforation or the watermark changes, then they will repeat it. So perforation, watermark, printing, is it typography, lithography, engravure, what type of printing is it? And you have to distinguish between those. Type of paper, this drives me crazy because I can never figure it out. Chalky, blue, yellow, all kinds of different papers. And again, for older stamps, unless you have an example or 2 or 3 of each, it can be difficult to distinguish between the different types of papers. The other thing is there may be more than one difference. It may have a different perforation, a different watermark, and a different type of paper. And so you have 3 stamps, all different. It could be, what, is that up 9 or 10 differences if you mix perforations and watermark and paper together. Now, this is described in detail in the front of the catalog, so you have to kind of read the front of the catalog that you're using to figure this out. Then mint are used. Mint is no cancel and gum on the back. The first kind of mint stamp is mint hinged, and then there's mint lightly hinged and mint heavy hinged. And before around 1930, the catalog value is for mint hinged, because all of those stamps that are existing today came from a collector's collection. So some other collector had them, hinged them in their album, because that was the only way of doing it. Now around 1930 or so, plastic mounts that didn't require you to lick a hinge and stick it on the back of your mint stamp came around. So people stopped hinging mint stamps, and so the catalog value sometime or other is going to be now for a mint never hinged. So MNH, mint never hinged, and that's assumed after around 1930. And the catalog will tell you when that is. Differs by country. Mint MNG, mint no gum, less value. Unused is also mint no gum. And the one thing you got to watch for is regummed. So someone had a mint hinge stamp from 18 something or other, or the gum was damaged or something, and so they cleverly took the stamp, washed off the old gum, put on new gum, and said, hey, this is a mint never hinged stamp, and it's now worth a lot more. Mint never hinged stamps from before, shall we say, 1930, much more valuable, much higher catalog value because there's so many fewer of them. Used is a cancelled stamp, and again, many different kinds of cancelled. Cancelled to order. Lots of countries printed thousands and millions of stamps for the purposes of selling them to collectors. And because they did that, the value of the mint stamp became very low. So they went, oh, okay, the used stamp has a higher catalog value than the mint stamp, so we'll just cancel them all. So they printed sheets and sheets of stamps, canceled them, sold them to collectors. They still had gum in the back. So a cancel to order stamp is worth less. Heavy cancel stamp is worth less. Messy cancel is worth less. Fancy cancel, and defining what a correct fancy cancel is, because sometimes a huge big black cancel that obliterates the whole stamp is actually considered to be a fancy cancel and worth more, even though that might be considered a messy cancel and worth less. So that's a complicated and specialized area. The color of the cancel. On the penny black of Great Britain, a red cancel or a blue cancel is worth more than a black cancel. Who knew? And then there's socked on the nose. So you can see on your used stamp the city and the date of use. They're legible. Some people collect that, and that's worth more to them. And on and on and on. So the characteristic of your mint or used stamp, there are many different variables that affect the value. Now, when you go to buy a stamp from a dealer, you find that they tend to sell to you for 30 to 50% of catalog. And the more you buy, the more of a discount they will give you. So you should be able to figure out from that if a dealer is going to buy a stamp from you, they're going to pay less than 30 to 50% because you can't buy for more than you sell. The other thing is the cost to a dealer is the time spent sorting and presenting for sale. So if you're presenting a big tub full of mixed stamps from all over the world to a dealer, there's probably nothing of particularly high value in there. It's going to take them a long time to sort it all out, and they probably already have all that stuff. So they're probably not going to be interested in buying something that's going to cost them a lot of time sorting and presenting for sale. So if you have an album nicely displayed and it has higher value stamps in it, and they are things that the dealer doesn't have and they can quickly look at and see the value, 10% of catalogs, kind of a rule. That when I talk to dealers, they say, yeah, I could pay up to 10% of catalog. Lower value if they are well sorted, so you have them in a stock book, nicely sorted out, so the dealer is not going to have to spend any time sorting them. And if he suddenly needs some of these more common stamps to sell, he will be able to quickly go to the book, take them out, put them in his book for sale, and he might be interested in buying them. Lower value, not sorted, because it's going to take so much time and effort to sort them out, probably not. And if he did buy them, if you sell an entire collection, including higher values in an album, and he takes all the rest of the stuff, you may find he just sells all that's the lower value, not sorted, sells it off in a bucket, $3, and gets rid of it, because he doesn't have the time to sort it, and he's already probably got it all. So higher catalog value stamps, maybe 10%. If they're absolutely perfect, maybe a bit more than that. If you had 1,000 stamps that cataloged at 40 cents, the dealer might pay you 40 cents. I exaggerate. But if it's just a whole mess of stamps, might be difficult to sell 1,000 40-cent stamps. Now, how do you sell stamps? If you are going to, you want to sell a collection and you're not going to go through a dealer, eBay, lots of competition and lots of work. Costs you sell, I say, 20%, 14% roughly to eBay and 4% to PayPal for managing the money for you. Other places, there are other places to sell stamps on the internet other than eBay, but same, lots of competition. Some cost more, some cost less. If you have higher value stamps, higher catalog value stamps, maybe you'll decide to sell them at an auction house. Some auction houses say, well, we want lots that will sell for $100 or more than $100. The commissions tend to be 30% there. Club auctions, if you have a lot that's going to sell for $1,000, you should probably not be surprised if that does not sell at a club auction. That's probably the kind of auction you want to sell at an auction house, even though they're going to take 30%, and at our club we take 10% of the sale price. So expect to sell at 10% of catalog or less, and expect that the club will take 10% to cover the cost of the club to pay for the room you're meeting in. So look at these internet sites, look at auction sites on the internet, look at what lots sell for, look at what unsold lots are and what they sold for to help you evaluate what the price is. And market value is market value. In other words, what it sold for is what it sold for. And some days things sell for more than you think they should, and some days things sell for less than you think they should, and some days things that you think should never sell, and some days things that you think are really good and really should sell, don't sell. So the market is the market is the market, and catalog value has nothing to do with that. They're trying to give you an indication. And as I said, there's these rules of thumb of 10% of catalog, buying for 30 to 50% of catalog. It's difficult to evaluate the market. If you want to sell your stamps at auction in Canada, the Canadian Stamp Dealers Association has a website, and they list their members that have auctions. For fun, Seagull Auction House, also on the internet, sells really expensive stuff, and it's fun kind of sometimes to just browse through their auction catalog, because they have stuff for sale that I'm never going to have or ever see in person. But it's fascinating stuff, and they do a wonderful job of describing it and tell you how the stamp was used and all kinds of details. So sometimes it's just, you know, they're stamps I'm never going to have in my collection, but I can pretend they're in my collection because I look at them on the internet. And there are other auction houses on the internet that you can research. So, thanks for listening.